composition has its own story, and that is what we're actually trying to do. Rod Stewart said it, every picture tells a story, don't it? You want to tell a story. And that urge to tell stories is really deep within our psyche, within mankind itself, is that urge. We love to tell stories. We love to hear stories. That's why we go to movies. That's why we read books. That's why we write people and write emails and text them and can't wait to tell that new bit of gossip sometimes that we hear because we want to pass on stories. But the difference here is these are visual stories. And this goes back to cave painting. You know, this one is from South Africa, and it's only about 6,000 to 8,000 years old. Cave paintings go back as far as 28,000. And there's somewhere in our past, there were cave dwellers. Somebody figured this out and figured out, you know, if I scratch with a certain kind of rock or pigment, I can actually make an image that looks like something that I saw out there. And that was actually a big technical breakthrough because it allowed that first person to tell the next person something that they saw without using words. And that's what, you know, our visual medium is all about. It's telling those stories. Now, a lot of time passed between then and 1845, but this was really close to the beginning of photography. This is a daguerreotype, which was one of the early, you know, stages of photography. It's still used today. I actually interviewed a guy last year who is a daguerreotyper, and he goes through the entire process in modern day. It's amazing. He showed me how it works. But one thing that's interesting about this is that the exposure time for a daguerreotype is anywhere from about 50 seconds to 10 minutes. Now, if you look at these kids, that's pretty remarkable. To get kids to sit there, stand still for at least 50 seconds and not be blurry. But you notice a lot of those early photographs, you know, one person is still and a lot of them are blurry because they just weren't able to sit still for that long. Okay, moving along, that allowed people to all of a sudden use, instead of painting or drawing, use another new medium of visual storytelling. The big breakthrough really occurred 118 years ago when Eastman Kodak, George Eastman came up with the Kodak Brownie. And that was all of a sudden a mass market camera. Everybody could buy one of these things. You could take those rolls of film and get them developed, and bam, all of a sudden we had this huge burst of photography. Lots of other developments occurred, but we fast forward up to 2007 with the first iPhone, and there's an explosion of photographs. So all along, though, there's been this urge, which is, I want to tell a story. But you don't want to just tell any story. You want to tell the story that you want to tell. And that's where composition comes in. Because if you just press the shutter and you get a snapshot, you're just guessing. You may or may not get something of interest. But if you use the tools correctly, you can guide that photograph and you can guide your viewer to see what you saw and what you felt, which at the end of the day is what a really powerful photograph consists of, that emotional connection, that emotional impact. Okay, now diving into composition, there's kind of interesting, there's a common misconception that on one hand you get this school that there's no rules. You just sort of have to be guided with your own intuition, and it's something you learn along the way. Has anybody besides me subscribed to that idea, that you just kind of feel your way along, and hopefully one day you're gonna get it? Okay, that's on one extreme. The other extreme is, hey, dude, there's nothing but rules, and if you know all these rules, you're gonna somehow end up with a good photograph. Well, the truth lies, like many things in life, right in the middle. The truth is there are no rules of photography. You know, a rule or a law is like the law of gravity. Now, if I take this camera and I let go of it, what's going to happen to it? It's going to fall. It's probably going to break, depending on how high I am. Now, that's not subject to change. I haven't learned to levitate my camera yet. I'm working on it. But until I do, when I let go of it, there's a law at work and there's a rule, and it's going to fall. But let's say you don't compose a photograph on the rule of thirds. Do you get issued a citation? Do the aesthetic police, pull you over and say, listen, I just saw you compose with the subject right in the middle of the frame. I'm going to give you a warning this time, but if we catch you doing it again, we're going to take your camera away. That's what a rule is. The truth is, these are guidelines. These are tools that you can use or not use at your discretion. But, when you learn to cook, you don't do it by just pure intuition. You usually follow a recipe. And by following the recipe, if you do it right, you should come out with a meal that tastes good. Now, after somebody cooks something enough times, sure, it becomes intuitive. You don't have to follow a recipe, but that's after they've already learned it and integrated it into their thought process. So my thought here is, rather than follow either one of these two extremes, is to give you a set of tools that I've found by researching the subject, that if you have them in your toolkit, just like going back to the analogy of cooking in a kitchen, if you know how to use all the different utensils that you need to use when you're preparing a meal, and what's the difference between a knife and a spatula, and a spoon and a fork, and why you use butter sometimes and why you use oil sometimes, if you know those things, you're going to be a better cook. And if you know these compositional tools, you're going to be a better photographer. So I'm going to give you 83 of them, not all of them today because we don't have enough time. I'm going to skip around, but in the book I give you 83. And there's a lot of ways, by the way, you can use this book. One of them is you can carry it, it's small enough to put in your camera case. And if you're out photographing somewhere, you want inspiration, you can literally just thumb through here until you find one that sort of resonates for you and go, I'm going to try that. I'll give you some other ways to do it in a minute. In my course, The Secrets to Amazing Photo Composition from the Masters, you're going to learn that every picture tells a story, but how do you tell yours? You're going to learn composition secrets that the master artists have used for centuries. You're going to learn how to pull your viewer into the center of interest of your photo, and how to use contrast to build excitement. What are the many different ways to frame your image, and how mood lines can affect your photo? Hey, what happens when you use the wrong mood to tell your story, and what really happens when you use the right one? I give you 83 composition techniques and how you can use them like a great chef uses recipes to create amazing meals. Jump on board with this course right now. You're going to love it.